Now let's dive deep into this big LGBTQ story. An LGBTQ plus breaking news story for today. I'm Faye Watt, and let's queer up the breaking news. Pope Francis dies today as Queer News Tonight discusses his LGBTQ rights legacy. Pope Francis, the first Latin American pontiff and a figure both beloved and debated across the globe, died today at the age of 88. Church bells tolled across Rome as Cardinal Kevin Farrell made the announcement from the chapel of Domus Santa Marta. Francis's longtime residence. Quote, at 7:35 this morning, the Bishop of Rome, Francis, returned to the home of the Father. His entire life was dedicated to the service of the Lord and of his church, end quote. Francis had been battling chronic lung disease and was hospitalized in February with double pneumonia. He passed away just one day after blessing thousands from the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica on Easter Sunday. In his 12 years as Pope, Francis brought a tone of compassion to many controversial topics, including LGBTQ inclusion. Pope Francis has been the most forward-thinking pope on LGBTQ issues in history. He made headlines in 2013 when he said of gay clergy, quote, "Who am I to judge?" end quote. Later, he publicly urged the church to apologize to queer people for past mistreatment. Francis supported civil unions for same-sex couples and called laws criminalizing homosexuality, quote, an injustice. Yet, he upheld traditional church teachings, barring openly gay men from seminaries and limiting how same-sex couples could be blessed. He met with trans Catholics, backed their participation in baptisms and weddings. Pope Francis was named the Advocate magazine's Person of the Year, and now the world waits as the College of Cardinals prepares to choose his successor. You know, it washes over many Catholics that the Pope died on Easter Monday, right? And he was still able to be seen yesterday for Easter Sunday. He didn't do his usual speech, you know, he didn't do the usual service, but they were able to see him there, you know. And Pope Francis was one of those popes, like I remember growing up with the Pope before him and just everything being negative when it came to LGBTQ, right? And Pope Francis was the first one to actually put like love and tenderness and saying that we're all God's human and who is he to judge? And, you know, he sat with trans clergymen. I mean, that's huge, you know. He also might have said the faggot word, you know, in some backdoor meetings that, you know, we found out about, right? But I mean, again, still the most forward-thinking pope that we had in our time frame, you know. He allowed priests to bless same-sex couples. I know people that like cried from that, from just being able to be part of that, you know. My wife is a recovering Catholic, you know, she was raised Catholic and a lot of this stuff kind of stings her, but she was even touched today, you know, like I think millions and millions of people today are mourning Pope Francis's passing for sure. Now, I just wonder, did J.D. Vance have anything to do with it? He was one of the last people who saw him.
You know, many people on the internet have been saying, you know, we're just asking questions as the right loves do. So they're just asking, did J.D. Vance kill him? I don't know. I wasn't there. I will say in all seriousness, like on one hand, you know, Pope Francis, you know, is an imperfect man, but that kind of made him very human as a pope compared to previous popes that were very distant. You know, Pope John Paul, like, you know, he was that very distant figure. Benedict was after him, another very distant figure, but Francis was very humble. He didn't wear Prada shoes like the other ones. Yep. He decided to be a much more man of the people, and I think that was something that is probably going to be his biggest legacy, is that, like, you know, on LGBTQ, he was better than all the other popes, but let's be honest, it was a very low bar.
Yeah.
But, you know, when I think about with his death, the other thing is, it was, you know, when you think about older people today, they normally have a very slow, painful time, and he had been in and out of the hospital, but we didn't see the media circus like the Death Watch of John Paul, thank goodness. Yeah. You know, but, you know, I think there's some modern politics that need to be mentioned in this, not just J.D. Vance, but like, you know, for the next pope, cardinals have to be under the age of 80 to vote for the next pope. And I'm like, if the Democratic Party had a similar policy, we might not be in the same situation in this country. That's all I'm saying.
Facts. What do you think, Vaughn?
You know, he lived a life of servitude. And I remember hearing some things about him about, you know, he liked to reach out to a lot of the people in prisons. And, you know, he would approach them with, I'm a sinner too. You know, that whole, you know, Jesus mentality, and really servitude. He chose not to wear the fabulous garments that so many of them have worn, and he wanted to live a very simple life. He wouldn't even live in the apartment which was a very luxurious apartment.
With the gold toilet or whatever?
Yeah, he chose a very simple, modest place to live in an apartment. So it just continued to show, you know, he wanted to be there for the people, and that resonates very well, I think, with a lot of people because of that. And it showed that effort of love in so many ways. He also encouraged families who had gay children not to condemn them because they were gay.
Yeah.
So that's a very important message too, that they could say to those families of, don't condemn your children because they're gay, you know. And so, I mean, it's a sad passing, and I'm curious to see what will happen next.
Yeah, what a legacy. You know, I mean, I sit there and look at all of the contributions he had while he was here, and it's just amazing and, you know, inspiring, because it's a ripple effect, you know, and then you see, and then I'm seeing all of a sudden other churches, you know, displaying LGBTQ plus flags. And I'm like, wow, that actually gives me hope for this type of organized religion, as we call it. So.
You know, I think back to, I keep remembering this because I think of Mother Teresa, and I think about one of the quotes that I usually quote a lot in my emails, and that is, you know, I may not be able to change the world, but I can cast a stone that will cause many ripples. And I think that's so important, because look what's happened from what she's done, what he's done. It's this ripple effect that's happening, and is still going to continue to happen. I hope. That's my hope anyway.
You know, whenever we do stories from this table about like religious hate against LGBT, right? You know, we're always like, it's always like cringy, right? And then most of us will always say like, God, when we were raised, we thought religious was about love, right? We thought all religions, the basis was love.
Right.
And he would make it a point to remind us, right? And we're all God's children at the end of the day. And that's all we wanted, was to be seen as God's children, right? We want the same opportunities as anybody else. And I felt that he saw that.
Right.
You know, and he made it a point, you know, so he will be missed. Oh, you know what, before we finish, I asked a question for you. So now what happens? Do a bunch of Cardinals go to the Sistine Chapel and like throw names in a box and figure it out? Like, what happens? I'm
not an expert on it, but they have a conclave. I guess all the Cardinals can go, but you have to be under 80 to vote, which I still just overwhelmed. I wish America could do that with picking leaders sometimes, but like, and I remember that there'll be black smoke, so they put it on pieces of paper, and if it's a win, white smoke will come out, and if it's not a win, it's black smoke. I don't know how they change the color of the smoke.
Okay.
They'll probably claim it's a miracle, but it's probably something with the paper. I don't know. Well, I'm sure the CNN or somebody will explain it eventually.
For sure. Thank you, Alex. That is the big LGBTQ story for today. There is no other queer nonprofit media platform like this in the entire world. Support our LGBT